Hey, this is Gareth Webb, and you're listening to Breakout, a show that cuts through the hiring noise. Here, you'll get an unfiltered view on what early and growth stage companies are doing so that you can take their best practices, processes, and frameworks and implement them to help you build teams more confidently.
All right, Gareth, welcome back to another episode of the Breakout Podcast. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Jake. Very good, thank you. How are you?
Good. We are coming up on the end of Q3, but it'll be officially recapped when this gets aired. So we are here to discuss all things and trends that kind of happened throughout Q3. You know, we just came back from our own team offsite talking about obviously end of Q3 going into Q4 plan strategy, thinking about planning obviously next year is I'm sure top of mind for a lot of companies. So I think this should hopefully be timely for listeners.
Yeah, I spoke to it's Tuesday today, already spoken to global heads, VPs of talent, and they're deep in headcount planning for 2025, and it's just turned October. So I guess for those people out there, they are public enterprise type companies, so they're not, there's a lot of work there. So yeah, that's kind of 3 months of planning and preparation and budgeting. So, for those that think these things just get pulled out of thin air, that's not the case. Promise you, there's a lot of consideration going into headcount planning still, even after, what we are probably calling a recovery year this year in the technology and SaaS AI markets.
Any big takeaways from those conversations that you can share?
I mean, the main thing is obviously there's lots of layoffs in the last year or two, and especially since as we know, May 2022 is when things kind of got nasty and started to, 2023 was pretty brutal. There's still a huge saturation of unemployed recruiters, in-house recruiters and talent acquisition professionals. So I think the main thing that talent leaders are looking at is how do they keep their team who are in place capacity and productive, and then making sure that there is a need to keep those people and that they all have sufficient amount of positions to go and hire for, and then how they're resourced, how they're tooled, what technologies they're using, and then how they cater for a surge if there's a surge. So it's kind of similar probably to last year, whereas I think this year is way more like, okay, rates are tapering, hiring in technology seems to be building momentum gradually for the right kind of positions. So yeah, they're just kind of like trying to manage workloads and capacity, I would say. But I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise.
Got it. Cool. So today we've, been going through a lot of news articles, conversations, obviously we're both pretty involved in all the LinkedIn news as well. Wanted to pull some of the most pertinent, I think, conversations and subjects that have come up, especially over the last quarter. We've always been sharing a lot of articles prior to this too. So, I think we'll just take this time and go through that. 3 big things that came across to me, from a thematic standpoint is, this idea of being an employer's market. What does that mean? Are we an employer's market? How do, hiring teams and candidates adjust if needed for that? Return to office continues to make headlines. So I want to dive into that too. And then, lastly, if we have some time, touch on AI. Obviously, if we are in the tech space and we're talking about AI, then what are we doing? So, there's some news there just in terms of, AI skills demand and how that's kind of shifted over the last couple of years, as well as AI's place in recruiting, which I think will be kind of interesting. You and I were sharing a LinkedIn talent solutions, article earlier today as well. So, you want to dive into it?
Yeah, for sure. I think the headlines have been awash with the return to work conversation. And when we were on our team offsite, I met a few execs out of hiring, like more on commercial and technology side of the business. And it was all they were talking about. It was all they were asking me about was like, what's going on there? So I think, it's very well timed. Very well timed.
Well, let's jump into that.
Yeah.
I don't have to go through all the headlines, but we can touch on the Amazon Andy Jassy letter, was circulated quite a bit. That was one of the big moves, but I have a couple others here listed in terms of the return to office mandates. Disney, JP Morgan, I'm sure a lot of other banks, Zoom, Google, IBM, and then Dell, I think just last week made the news as well. So a lot of the companies kind of making the shift and mandating. Want to quickly read through from Amazon here, a couple of things that he mentioned in his letter. 2 areas that the S team and I have been thinking about last several months are: 1, do we have the right org structure to drive the level of ownership and speed we desire? And 2, are we set up to invent, collaborate, and be connected enough to each other and our culture to deliver the absolute best for our customers and the business that we can? We think we can do better on both. So that's kind of how he sets things up. He goes a lot into reestablishing and making sure they have a strong, innovative company culture. That seems to be where they're really centered around. I think we've heard a lot of talk about, productivity, and team performance not being where companies want it to be. I'm curious about that and a little skeptical as well. And then also companies, disguising these as layoffs in a way too has been obviously in the news. So I think 3 kind of subjects or reasonings to dive into. I want to get your take on that and see if there's anything else you're hearing or seeing or already your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think I would underline this whole kind of conversation with everyone's free to do what they want to do and everyone's free to work where they want to work. Essentially, that's the beauty of the markets, and especially in the US where there's a more transient workforce by nature. People always moved around more to follow jobs, move to different cities, coasts, whatever that may be. And I think I've always said this, that employers are well within their right to say whatever they want to say and do whatever they want to do because ultimately they pay. So, but it doesn't mean they're paying the salary. You get to get Amazon on your Amazon X, Tesla. You get to get that logo on your resume. If you want that resume, you do what you're asked to do anyway. Where you do it, it's kind of up to them, I think. And they will have enough people who are talented that will want to go and work there, in my opinion. But they will lose a lot of talent because some people just don't like being told what to do in this day and age. And that's kind of the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy kicks in because technology is supposed to enable you to do more either with less or from anywhere, right? It's the whole point of mobile phones, internet, apps. So the day that Zoom, talking to a customer the other day, I was like, the day that Zoom mandate returned to office, don't know if they have done that yet, but that's probably going to be peak hypocrisy. Have they?
Yeah, that was part of
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Have they?
Yeah.
So I said that yesterday to a customer and I was joking. I was like, if Zoom do that, then we know it's peak hypocrisy.
No, they were one of the big companies too, which to your point is just,
so it's
that's a tough one, right?
Come back to work and never use our product because we don't want our own employees to use the thing we build and sell. So that's ridiculous. I think I understand why people want to do it because execs find it frustrating to sort of really know what's going on with people, and you're paying the money, you want to see the effervescence and the was Eric Schmidt in his book about how Google works calls it if you want to innovate, you have to have everyone really close and it's got to be messy, hectic office, and it's this primordial soup of innovation, which I think is kind of fair and fine if that's what you want. And some inventor type, product designer types will want to be in a lab, but again, not every day, not all the time. And so I think people are just missing the point and they're showing a little bit of bitterness or I dare past it maybe. If you look at Amazon's stock price at the end, in around the time of the pandemic was $95. And then now it's $185. So I know it's not all about that, but they've gone up, they've gone down, they've gone back up again. They've essentially doubled their market cap since the remote work. And they were huge anyway. So doubled their market cap since remote work was mandated. And then they're saying that's not enough for us. You have to come back in. And then I think they will lose talent. And that's fine. That's it. That's for them to do. And then it's for other people to capitalize on as a competitive advantage for talent, which is, hey, we're never going to do that. That's not how we work. Also, just different. Like I said, if you're an inventor and you're building a product or a physical widget, so obviously Tesla, right? If you're there designing Tesla and you're making it and you're engineering it, I think you should be in the office more than you're not. But if you're selling it or you're a CFO or you're in the FP&A team or you're in go-to-market or branding, do you need to be in the office 5 days a week? So I think it shouldn't be for everybody. It should be probably more function specific or personal taste. You've got all these different categories now of fully mandated in office, fully remote. Then you've got mandated hybrid, and then you've got flexible hybrid, and then there's obviously gradients of each different offering. I think everybody, getting software engineers to go in the office 5 days a week, we know based on the stats is at times borderline impossible because it is an employer's market. But again, it's not for every function. It's not for every type of hiring. So if you're a really good salesperson over the last 2-3 years, it's not an employer's market. It's your market. You can essentially, if you produce millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year for a business and you earn millions of dollars a year, then it's not the employer's market. It's your market. You can sort of name your price and your conditions. The same for very good software engineers, I would say. Like if you're a machine learning AI specialist building LLMs for OpenAI, they might have you in there quite a bit, but essentially you're there because you want to be. You could go lots of other places and get very well paid. So I think it's personal taste. It should be looked at by the nature of what the job is. And I think that they'll be fine. Like Amazon, JP, Tesla X, they'll be fine because enough people want to go and work at those places where they'll staff their companies accordingly. But I think it's a really good opportunity for people that are like, yeah, we're going to be way more flexible than that. The big thing I think is like hub hiring, like getting people into area. If you're rather than one HQ and everyone's got to be in there, if you have multiple little sites, then you get that connectivity of like dispersed talent. And you can say, hey, 2-3 days would be great if you could come in if that works.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I want to underscore one of the things you said too, just like within talent, still opportunity and still your market and mobility. 2 other articles just to kind of add to this really quick that we had discussed earlier. An article from HR Dive, a couple of just data points that I looked at that was kind of interesting. And this isn't a surprise, right? But 80% report losing talent after return to office. And there's some concern there, obviously. You could argue that that's obviously probably partly intended. And the question is, the high performers are the ones within that where the real issue kind of lies. We looked at another recent study from MIT Sloan that looked at companies that have mandated return to office, looked at their financial performance. So these are obviously companies where we can see that in public, there's publicly reported information on that. So pre and post return to office mandates, there was no significant change in financial performance. So for those saying that, we need to increase performance or productivity or whatever that may be, I think that kind of makes that point moot. Curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think one of the big problems with fully remote was that leadership teams were telling people to come in 3-4 days a week, but the execs were not coming in. So then that causes morale problems and probably therefore a productivity problem. So I think what this move is yes, it's obviously a bit of a, what's it called? Like instead of a silent quitting, quiet quitting, this is quiet firing without a doubt. But then I think it's also execs saying, yeah, we need our leadership to be in and be visible. So we're mandating it. Because if it's not mandated, the leaders are the ones that have been exploiting the kind of loophole, so to speak. Because they're like, well, I don't need to be in there. I'm not a graduate or whatever. And there is easy for them to say where like, I was at a meeting or I was wherever. So I think that's part of it. Yeah, and I think time will tell. We've had, it's very knee-jerky, isn't it? Like people always go on the most recent narrative, like, okay, we have to be remote because of the pandemic. It's working quite well because the markets are going crazy and tech's selling, so everyone stays remote. Then you have a rate hike and SaaS depression, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, we need to see what you're doing and pull everyone back into office. And there's a whole different point to this conversation, which is the commercial real estate kind of play and people having space they're paying for and it's a ghost town. And then they're like, well, we can't get out of these leases. We want to be psychologically, we want people in there because we're paying for whatever. I don't know. There must be lots of companies that took out 10, 15 year leases pre-pandemic. And then they're like, we need to get value out of that because it's costing us millions of dollars a month or year. So, I think it's just like all these things. It can just be a straight up executive coming in and wanting to flex and being like, I'm going to be really stern and hard and watch what happens. I think actually people will not want to play along with that and they'll find alternative opportunities. And for some people, they have to, taking kids to school, picking kids up from school, going to a fitness class on the way in, or, in the middle of the day, but catching up that time in the evening is more valuable than a logo now or, I don't know, X percentage of your comp. I don't think they're going to start paying people, are they, to go in either? Like, you can't cover commuting costs. So I think there will be whiplash, from this. But again, like, they'll be fine. They'll keep doing what they're doing. And, some people will want to get the logo, and then lots of people will go to new businesses. And that's the beauty again. That's the beauty of the free market.
Yeah. To me, it's, there's a shift in preferences in terms of what employers are looking for. That's creating opportunity and mobility, especially for your top performers to decide what they want to do with that.
What percentage of comp would you need an increase to go in 5 days a week? Just out of interest. No pressure.
I think about it. I mean, I'm definitely at the, I value the flexibility of our setup, and I think that'd be very difficult. I don't think I have a good answer for that off the top of my head.
What, like 50%, 100%?
I mean, I'd have to probably start considering it at that level. Yeah.
Yeah. But not 25%.
But anything less than, no.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But 50%, you would do, but would you get used to it? Would you be miserable? And then would you think, oh, now I've got like...
Yeah, I feel like I've been in a situation 6-9 months down the road
maybe leave. Yeah, exactly. That's what I think will happen.
Yeah, I like this headline here. Your organization's highest performing employees want executives to focus on outcomes and accountability, not office badge swipes. And again, I think that's kind of just, this pertains to the top talent piece, where there's still mobility there. And they will ultimately have a say of what they want to do.
Yes, they will vote with their feet, essentially.
Let's kind of continue this conversation, but I want to go back to the idea of the employer's market you were mentioning a little bit. I want to bring up something I had read recently. Job applications grew at 4x the rate of job ads from the first half of 2024. So we're seeing quite an acceleration within this year alone. And I imagine this probably going to continue, maybe soften a little bit. We'll see what happens with rates and everything. But that's pretty staggering. What's your take on that?
I think some of it is a lag effect from the year or two before, where people didn't want to move during the layoff, like the consistent layoffs where, everything on LinkedIn was bad and people being cut left, right and center. So I think some people just stalled and just sat where they were, and then markets have improved this year and they're thinking, okay, like, I want to move now because I stayed somewhere I didn't really like for an extra year or two just because I didn't want to be last in, first out. Yes. Last in, first out. So, I think there's that. I think there's just general market improvements. So people thinking they can maybe move and make an increase in comp. And then there's a lot of exciting things going on as well. So I think people potentially seeing things that they like the look of, they want to get into this AI race, which is what it is. And, there's some big checks been written this year from the VCs into that space. So
seems like the only checks being written.
Yeah, AI specific, healthcare, AI, and then obviously the other thing to consider there, not just sitting tight, but a lot of people, maybe their stocks vested or they know that the valuations are underwater from 21, 22, where the money was, moving around freely and they thought their stock was worth X and now it's not. So they're like, okay, well, have a reality check and move on. That's just part of the game as well. That's the problem with some of the vesting structures and the pricing and of stock. So, I think doesn't surprise me. And then, yes, as you said, being an employer's market, it's still kind of, if you're an absolute A+ player, like if you're the best in sales and you have the track record, same for software engineering, same for leadership. Like if you're really stellar and you've achieved a lot of really good things, then to a degree, you still get to name your price, not in talent acquisition. Yes, still, the pre-layoff era comp deals are not happening. And there's, like I said, there's still lots of TA professionals on the market. But I think, ultimately, again, with companies saying where you get to work, they decide who they hire and who they get rid of in some way, shape or form. So I definitely think that we're in a place where there's more interviewing, picky hiring folks. They don't want to make the mishire. They haven't got the time to train and onboard. They want absolute impeccable people joining their business, taking a bit longer to get to that answer, and they're still paying for it. They're paying quite well for it. We're seeing good examples of comp, for the skill and the outcome versus years of experience. I think that's the thing that's changed. It's like companies want the right people in who are high performing. They will pay more relative to where that person's at in their career, potentially, if they have that extra confidence. Yeah, these are all kind of healthy things if you think about it. Like hiring a bit more considerately, paying people for the job they're doing versus the age they are or the experience they've got. I don't think that's terrible. It just means it's more competitive.
Yeah, competitive for sure. We know one of the metrics we look at is our candidate submissions or matches, is what we call internally, per hire has started to go up. And that kind of ties to what you just mentioned, right? The pickiness, the kind of idea of shopping, or, even if there is a really good fit, person, it would be great. The idea of we just want to see more, seems to be pretty prevalent still. And also one more thing on that is, again, everything has to be taken. Like, we talk hiring, but actually it's hiring for engineering, hiring for product management, hiring for account executives. Mm-hmm. They're all really different. So software engineers now, they're not kind of cool with just coming in and building legacy SaaS products. They want to be working on AI automation, machine learning, deep learning, whatever we want to call it. Like, they want to be, like, the really, really strong ones want to be like right at the edge of that. So there is this like herding to those kinds of businesses, and then everyone else who's maybe not quite native AI finding it a bit harder for engineering talent. And then for sales, it's like, well, we know that people want to go somewhere where there's traction and there's good product market fit, and there's other reps doing well, and there's good ARR or whatever the pricing structure is. But like other examples of people doing well, those companies are maybe a bit further along. They're going to be hiring the good salespeople. So yeah, I think it's just function specific, product type specific. So let's not look at hiring a theme in general, but really dive into the specific functions, departments, because there's a very different story that might be telling. Regardless, I'm sure there's obviously some frustration, especially for those departments or areas where you're seeing large number of applicants per opening, which is, I think, the underlying cause of a lot of the frustration from a candidate standpoint. What's your take or answer to that in terms of kind of easing some of that or getting around that? What's your pitch to candidates on how to ease that frustration?
Well, if they're trying to change jobs and how competitive it is.
Yeah. Hey, I've submitted hundreds of applications. Every job I'm looking at has so many, I feel like I can't get in front of anyone.
So I think it's just pausing at the beginning and really thinking through like what they're very, very good at and where their most value is offered, which should be the case, right? But we know everyone just fires off applications. But I think, does the resume, like, for a better phrase, the resume pop, like, does it show very quickly what you do, how you do it, and what those results are? We're nearly at the end of 2024 and we still get people who don't know how to put a resume together, or they put bad resumes together, and these are professionals. So how's that happening? Well, that's kind of like just not committing the time, because there's so many tools and templates and stuff out there. Like, I reckon if you spent an hour researching, most successful resume layouts, and then there's people that can do it for you. And there's just good Gen AI now can even help you with some, you have to have the prompts. So I think it's just the time spent up front thinking about what you want to do and what you're good at. Most people chance it. So if we assume we're dealing with the non-chancers who are like the really good professionals, 5, 10, 15 years into technology, got multiple positions or years of good stints behind them, really getting your story straight, getting your facts straight, explaining where you'd be a good fit, and then not relying on applications. Like, that's just, click to apply or the LinkedIn click to apply or apply here, or easy apply, isn't it? Like, not really any such thing as easy apply. Like, you're going into a line of hundreds or thousands of people. So get creative, be more personalized, look at the execs or the founders or the VPs of the businesses that you think you've got the best shot at, and spend time, put time aside. I think most people just talk themselves out of the game, honestly. They don't think it's worth that time and investment because they don't do enough to get the return. So, that's just human nature, unfortunately. But I think, targeting the businesses you want to go to, paying some money for a LinkedIn premium license. I talked to a very good friend of mine recently about this. I was like, get a LinkedIn premium license, get in front of some of the executives of the business you want to go to, give them a reason to talk to you. Can I, for example, whatever, like, can I buy you a coffee if you sit down and meet me for 15, 20 minutes so I can pitch you why I should come and work for you? I think it's it is a real tricky one because you can apply for some jobs and get response and you may not thought you did. Then you can have lots of rejections and you on paper are a good fit, but the recruiting team or the hiring manager is just not buying. They might not know where you worked or, you're too big in terms of experience. So I think you almost got to not think about what jobs and just go to the businesses, go to the team and present your case. And we talk to clients a lot. We just made a hire. Actually, somebody approached us and it was a really good approach and they put a business plan together for us and we loved it and they referenced well. We got customer reference. So, for sales, you can do that. For marketing, you can show campaigns. For engineering, you could write some code for the customer or company and say, hey, here's what I would do. I found the problem. Here's how I'd fix it. I think if you're relying on a resume working, then you are just leaving it in the hands of the gods, essentially, whereas you don't really want to do that. So, and I think the other mistake people make is they focus too much on their immediate network. There's so much out there, relying on your network is just fine. Yep. But, we're in the internet era and you've got a LinkedIn seat and just go and get in front of people and put some good follow-up in place. But people is putting your soul out there a little bit.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things you mentioned that I wanted to highlight. Really finding a way to show and prove value seems to be the big thing going out of the traditional application method. One that I had made too, as you were mentioning that, I'm sure this has gone up too, but the latest or most recent data I had seen, the average job posting was getting, one would come from 250 applications. That might be even higher at this point, I would assume, just given the...
I would assume. I looked at some of ours earlier and one of them was into the 700-800s.
Yeah. So, you need a robust process to go and even filter through that, right? And from a recruiter standpoint, you mentioned this, I think, on our last conversation together, but it's nice because, we don't have just one role that we're kind of placing them for, but there could be multiple roles or companies that could be a good fit. So, the ability to kind of take some of that data in and move it around as needed is much more beneficial. So I am surprised you haven't mentioned this, but, I do think that the value in recruiting should not be overlooked, in this instance too. One, just helping you kind of understand where you do stand out in resumes. I think, almost as a sounding board, as long as you work with a good team and can find one, I thought that could be a good benefit from the candidate standpoint, just in terms of grounding yourself in what stands out, where someone else might think you're a fit, and kind of using that third party as a sounding board versus, like you said, hammering the easy apply.
You make a good point. So I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who's looking for a job, and he was like, "Look, I can't." He's been applying for jobs only, and I was like, "Well, that's just a total waste of time," because he's kind of like a director of ops, so there's not loads of those positions, and he should be essentially talking to founders or COOs, but probably founders and C-level folks at certain size businesses. So we were talking about that. He said he didn't want to talk to any recruiters. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't trust them necessarily, or I've not had a good experience. But when you dig into it, he hasn't used that many because he's not changed jobs that many times. So it's like, okay, well, find the ones that have multiple jobs posted that look like the right kind of thing for you. Don't necessarily apply for the job, but contact the recruiter directly, again, through LinkedIn, and have a conversation. Doesn't have to be a meeting, doesn't have to be arduous, but talk for 15, 20 minutes through your profile and see what they think. So yeah, it's a good point. I think a lot of people are hesitant, especially in the UK and Europe, I think, to talk to agency recruiters. I've had bad experiences with in-house in the past where, I was ushered through and it was all very opaque, and then the last minute things change, and that's quite frustrating. So I get people's frustration, But at the same time, it's like, do you want to get a good job or not? Like, if you want to get a really good job, you're going to have some knockbacks, and some friction. It's not just going to happen. I think that's the real problem is people expect if the right fit's out there, it will come to me. It's not how it works. Especially if you're not incredibly niche. If you're incredibly niche at what you're doing, then that can happen. But again, that's why I was saying to you, like the really strong in-demand skill sets, they are rejecting multiple opportunities a day that's coming into their inbox or they're getting hit up on the phone. So I think if you're slightly more generalist, you do have to like make the case, because it's less obvious. You're not going to flag up in Boolean search strings, which is essentially how LinkedIn works. You're not going to get matched to opportunities through, ATS kind of type recommendations. So yeah, there's like, it's hilarious that people think it should be easy because you just have to run the numbers, right? Like it's a pyramid of participation. There's lots of people. There's only one job. Why on earth should you get it? Like you have to go and earn the right to get that job. And that's just kind of like I sound very old here, but like that's a symptom of society in a way where everything's quite straightforward and easy with the Uberization of everything. Jobs is very different. Like there's only one job. When you see that job, there's one. So you might feel like you're a great fit and you get excited reading the spec, but so are 10, 20, 30 other people potentially. And then that's without the whole team consensus of a startup deciding who they let into the business. So yeah, it's just very, very difficult. And obviously like we've talked about, like we're trying to make it easier and gate things so that it's more sensible who sees the position or who gets in front of the customer. But again, it's like make the case, make it compelling.
Yeah. What I was going to say too, just to add on to that, just from a number standpoint, that 1 in 250, like which you mentioned, is probably even less now. That's a 0.4% conversion rate. So the thing that I think is really interesting, right? Exactly, almost zero. And I mean, if we said that's, we just had applications 4x. So that's going to be literally almost zero, like 1.2%. So I think the thing that for me is interesting that I wanted to underscore is for candidates, knowing you're going through LinkedIn or job boards, you're going to their least productive channel in terms of finding conversions for hires, to the point where it's almost zero. So your chances through job boards, LinkedIn, Easy Apply, et cetera, are so low. There's a rounding error, right? So to your point, finding those other methods, just seems to be such a important way of going about it and not relying on that, because you have to realize the numbers are not in favor at all.
Yeah,
and they never really are. They're not in favor in an employer's market or not an employer's market, which is the piece I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think just being really focused, like if you need a job, you need a job. We're not really talking about those people, right? And like you have to do everything. If you're in a job and you've got a really great resume, and profile and you're doing well, that's when you've got to like construct or architect a move. And it's very different. You even sometimes want to get, say for example, you're getting an end of year bonus in December. You really want to have that job now. Like, so you've got it, you've done all the work through the summer, you've been on a plane and met the people, you've Zoom met the others, you've got your customer references over, or you've got team references or hiring manager, previous line manager references over. So I think the big problem is people don't do anything about it until they need it. And then it's like, then it becomes a rush, then it becomes stressful, then it becomes annoying. Whereas if you cherry pick and do things in a slightly more systematic, thorough way ahead of time, then you hold more of the cards as well, which I think is what people wish they had when they were trying to find a job versus like, I'm going to have to take this.
I like your thoughts on this. So we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but that's what this podcast is for anyways. Once we do this, then we can move on to our AI conversation really quick. You mentioned the idea of like, this mismatch of skills or someone thinking they're a good fit. And that resonated with me just because when I was looking at one point, I was definitely falling into that as well. Like looking at jobs being like, this is perfect for me. Like, I think I was even looking at like product manager roles, right? Like, there's clearly experience that I have in the past that could make me a good fit for that. But like, looking in hindsight now, there's absolutely no way that was going to happen. There's such a mismatch. despite me as a candidate thinking that on paper. So I don't know if there's a good solve for this. It's almost like there needs to be a standardization of skills across functions that both the candidate side and the client side or company side can like almost agree upon. But I just don't know how possible it even is. Want to get your take on that really quick before we move on.
I think the cat's out of the bag in terms of like all positions being like, we know not all positions are posted on the internet because we'll get them sometimes, and the client will say to us, we want you guys to give us best fit, go and find the cream, like the top 2% of this particular position spec. I think that's how it should be done, especially for like important, very skilled, niche or senior hires. There is no point in just, teasing the whole candidate audience with a job that they're never going to get. Like, most people admit to just, scrolling, clicking, apply. Oh, I'm definitely not good enough for that, but it's paying 150K, like kind of for their own mindset have to apply. It's just totally ridiculous. So I think we are coming towards like an end of clients. There's so many people looking for jobs now and so many people who don't fit, like whether they like it or not, right? This is all quite elitist, but like whether they don't fit the bill in terms of the quality check markers, proven in the right field or the very transferable field. Like you said, they might think they are because they really want it and they can see it. And it's like, you can see everything, can't you? You can see so much about a job. You can see the company, what their product is. You can see their team on LinkedIn. You can go on Glassdoor and look at like their offices, and all that kind of stuff. So there's too much information, too much transparency. People want it and they can't have it. So they get frustrated, and then they take that frustration, I think, and apply it to all other elements of like trying to find a job. And I think we've all been there. So it's not like this is us telling people what they should, like, it's not us, you and I saying, oh, I don't know why people get frustrated. You and I have both been there. We've both been frustrated, looking for jobs in the past. And yeah, that it comes back to a little bit of our philosophy, right? Of like really stringent matching, whether, and running things as a search. Every position should be run as a search, unless it's like a grad thing. And then, or junior or non-skilled, then it's like, okay, let's see who comes in and it's not cost money. My neighbor actually was telling me how they got a job through Indeed. But it was a very again, opportune timing, opportune location. But yeah, I just think all this stuff, these customers, these tech companies, the products they're building, it's very difficult, and selling them is difficult. And so it takes a certain type of person to get that job. So it shouldn't necessarily be easy to get the job. And then it even shouldn't be easy to keep the job because, the microscope is on everyone to perform in this environment where things are very difficult, very competitive and changing quickly. So yeah, I just think people need to come at like their job search with a clear head and a fresh approach each time, and not take previous trauma with them into the next set of interviews and applications or prospecting. And it is prospecting, really.
All that to say that it's noisy out there.
It's very noisy.
Let's talk about it. Well, will AI add to the noise or help?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thinking a lot about this at the moment. I think unfortunately it will do both. So you'll get a proliferation of AI sourcing tools, which are just going to increase spam.
Which is already happening.
It's already happening. And then what AI should be doing in any job is taking away the things that you don't like doing or it can do. I think of it as like, okay, all the things that we don't like about selling or recruiting or account management or anything that's difficult, then we want AI to do that stuff so that we can focus on the more strategic, valuable, longer term or human type interactions. So more meetings, more discussions, or more work on things that AI can't do. But AI hopefully will replace the things. So I do see it being pretty impactful for the talent acquisition industry. I say that lightly. I think it's going to be huge for the talent acquisition industry, but it's going to go through some iterations of good versus bad, which is kind of already happening.
Yeah.
So you want to go through this?
Let's do it. Prediction number 1, AI will supercharge recruiting, which you just kind of mentioned.
Yeah, it kind of has to. You have to put faith in what you see already, right? With Gen AI and But it's even that's creating lots of noise, isn't it? You still need to really be good at like how to direct it and take the results and present those results well. Like that, it doesn't do that yet. It still produces versions of things. Yeah, I mean, I think the things I think it's going to help with is sourcing, putting together bits of data and information and compiling more sources of data for people, and then managing, mimicking an outbound agent. We know that's happening already. So mimicking outbound, but making the engagement and managing the processes, that's going to be a way off. Like actually taking someone from initial conversation through to hire, that's still going to need humans. And I think humans will want to know there's a human at the end of it. Then you've got like, you know, all these other bits and pieces, like assessment, video assessment and interview assessment technology. There's going to be some people who are going to hate that because they won't like the fact that trust's being put into a relatively novel system to assess whether they're any good or not, or how they respond, whether they're lying, whether they look stressed, whether they seem convincing. So there's so many applications. But yeah, is that the bit of the red at the bottom there? Will not want to use AI and machine learning for hiring. That's part of the survey, isn't it? You know, the current use of AI and ML, and then you've got like a certain percentage, looks like 16% of people do not want to use AI for sourcing and hiring. So that's the thing. I think it's going to divide the world. Some people will just want to get a job through meeting people and face-to-face interviews and stuff. Some people understand the way it's going to be now is through AI. I don't know if it touches on this in that LinkedIn article. We'll post this article so people can look at it, because it's actually whether it will be legal to make hires. You'll have to probably state where and how AI has been used. I have seen some stuff already stating that it might be state law, federal law, European, obviously Europe with GDPR and stuff. You can imagine they're going to have to say, hey, this hiring process, it uses AI. Whether you use it to write the job spec, which is already happening, manage comms in a process, and mimic an agent in any way, shape or form, or compile offers or design tools. The applications are genuinely endless. Hopefully regulators decide they know better and start putting rules and regs in place for how and when it can be used. But I think it should make recruiters incredibly productive and give candidates a better experience if it's used in the right way. It should increase transparency. It should increase feedback loops. These are all things people hate about job applications. So, you know, people apply, they get nothing back. Then they get a no thank you email. Well, AI should be able to say, okay, thanks for your application. You've not been successful with this position because you don't have this, this, and this, or your resume doesn't say this. We need this. So people will still get irritated because they're like, well, I do have that. I just didn't write it in my resume, but at least there is the feedback loop of like, I got a reply. People, you know, it should kind of eliminate large portions of the recruiting black hole.
Yeah. Interesting. I take a little more skeptical view. I think that agility is something that should be enhanced or increased, but I'm kind of of the mindset to see one of the charts that we had referenced here is, we can post this article too, is from LinkedIn Talent Solutions. The number one benefit for recruiters reported from surveys was faster and easier to write job descriptions, with 57% reporting on that. I still take the idea of like your outputs are only going to be as good as your inputs. And I don't know that the job description, like, yes, it's a headache to write, but like the data that goes into that, I think is where teams still struggle the most in terms of like, is everyone aligned on the right skill sets and preferences, everything needed? And, you know, do we have that well defined in the first place? Because if that's not even done, then you're going to get kind of, you know, garbage out in terms of what's being written. So I don't know if it's really going to enhance much in that case. That's a very specific example, but.
Well, yeah, because it's the same as what people do now, which is go to a folder, pull one out, make some versioning edits, and it's the same thing. And then people don't read it anyway.
So it makes that process faster, but at the end of the day, it's like that process isn't necessarily the most beneficial. So you still have the underlying piece that needs to be solved, and we're kind of throwing stuff on top of that is my take currently. But who knows?
I think, you know, this whole market cleansing hasn't been a bad thing. And I talk to talent leaders and people leaders who agree that there's way too many recruiters in the market, not doing enough not even enjoying their work, but getting paid quite well to not do too much. So, the days of people with 3 to 5 years experience getting $150 a year in the US to be an in-house recruiter, God, like far too expensive, no output, no measurable ROI. So what you should have, really lean and mean TA teams or hybrids. I'm going future state here. My view is that TA and people ops become closer intertwined, where you don't just have standalone HR business partners and standalone TA. You might have people doing a bit of both, which I think is a better job for people to want to do and more satisfying, because then you understand the business and all the HR pain points. You can AI to help you with hiring, but it's not really about, like you say, production of documentation. I should go one step further and be identifying, matching, and then having some form of additional judgment layer. Like a pilot's always got to land the plane, but there's so many other things helping them. There's essentially AI, sensors, feedback mechanisms, feedback loops, guiding, and that makes for safer flying. We want to see more predictable hiring. We want to see de-risking hiring. We want to see more successful hiring outcomes. We want to see customers not paying stupid amounts of money per hire. So I think that's the bit AI has to fit into those desired outcomes, not like, oh, where can we apply AI just for the sake of it? Because I think the talent leaders and people leaders are very, very unsure about buying new tech because they get pitched to so much by so many little narrow sourcing widgets and tools and plugins that they're like, the ultimate problem here is that we want to see the right people make the right hires and those hires be successful. It's as simple as that. So if something doesn't fit into that decision-making framework or talent infrastructure, then I think it will die. I think a lot of agencies will die. I think talent teams will stay really small and lean. And I think AI will just help to supplement those teams. I think there's going to be AI for AI's sake, but I think that most of the buyers are pretty smart about knowing what's not going to help their outcomes versus, this spec's going to be more attractive than that one if you run it through our AI thing. It's like, well, we can probably do that for free ourselves. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. If you can replace people with full-blown like life cycle hiring experience management, then that's where it could be very big. But again, like whether there's like regulation to show that that's happening or not. So I know I'm dealing with an AI agent versus like Jake Gorgle or Emily or Cam or Elise at House Scout. Like maybe there's those disclaimers and you've got to actually like understand. Like that's going to be interesting to see what plays out.
Great. Well, we are way over time. You kind of touched on some of our predictions in regards to AI, but any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
I would say I'll be curious to see how the return to work thing plays out, just because the sad thing is, we didn't talk about this, it's going to impact a lot of people's lives where they've settled places, they've moved, they've bought houses, they've got the kids into school. And now they're being told, if you want to work here, you have to move back to, I don't even know where all of Amazon's places are. I'm guessing there's quite a few, like Seattle and is it Atlanta? Is there one? Or in the Carolinas or Jersey, somewhere like that. So that people have options. But I think the sad thing is it's going to impact some people's life in a very stressful way. And I think as long as they're giving people time to make those adjustments, I think it's fair for them to say, we want everybody in the office. We're sorry, but like, then I think the smart companies are going to go hub-centric and hire around hubs, with the exception that if they find somebody amazing and they're somewhere else, they'll make the hire. That seems to be what most of our customers, the bigger customers, are doing. And then startups, we're seeing a bit of 50-50. Like some are just fully remote, saves money, can hire anywhere. Some want to double down on, human times. I think that whole thing will be really interesting to see how it plays out. We can talk about it in 6-12 months. But I think that the AI thing, it's going to happen. It's just a case of where. I think most recruiters should just be thinking about it and showcasing how they can use it to drive up the way they hire in terms of like reduction of cost per hire, reduction of time to hire, stickiness of hires or retention of hires. So I think recruiters need to be really careful. Otherwise we might have this bloodbath again in like a year or two where companies are like, hey, we're going to have half the amount of recruiters because we've got all these other ways of doing it now. So I think that's the biggest thing to take away. Like anybody listening to this that's in talent acquisition, like don't wait for it to happen. Like, go and find out how you can be the person in your business that's sort of spearheading it. And, everything's going to come down to productivity and outcomes. So if you can show that you're talking to more candidates and making more hires versus other people because you're using certain tools or systems, then you'll be okay.
I think that kind of goes along with really anything, in terms of
any job. Yeah,
any job, right? It's like find ways to make yourself invaluable in business, and this seems to be a good path to take on some of that, especially since it's so new. All right, well, let's wrap up today, Gareth. I appreciate your time as always, and until next time.
No, that was good. Very interesting. Cheers. Talk soon.